Hello, Nottingham Video Game Expo. We all okay? You've been enjoying today? Yeah? It's been good to see this in Nottingham. You know, for years there's been a little build-up of events happening. We had the Video Game Museum in Nottingham before, and now we've got this, which is good. And there's lots of markets happening, there's lots of other events. Well, I'm Ravi Abbott, and I do a podcast called The Retro Hour, and that's been going for about 8 years now. And every week we interview someone. We've had Tony on our podcast before, and this is Tony Warriner of Revolution Software as well. And you've done some absolutely fantastic games for a variety of systems. So we'll kind of go through your history. And how are you enjoying Nottingham as well? Just turning up here.
I keep getting invited to things in Nottingham, and I feel like I kind of know my way around there.
Yeah, he knows all the bars and
yeah, which ones to avoid.
Definitely. Well, I think let's start from the beginning, and I was just wondering, what was the first kind of video game that really stood out for you?
The first one, we used to mess around at school with the BBC Micro and play. There was like a lunar lander type thing on the welcome disc. Remember the welcome disc for the BBC Micro? Anybody remember that? There was a game on it, wasn't there? It's what was it called? There was some vector thing on it, I think. So I played that a bit. Everyone was getting ZX81s. I remember 3D Monster Craze was like blew everyone's minds because it was like Doom.
Yeah.
1981, like the monster coming in like 3 frames. Like, you couldn't believe it.
What system did you have then?
I thought I wanted one of those things, so I started saving pocket money and skipped the ZX81 because it wasn't going very quickly, the saving that was. Skipped the Spectrum, which everyone else was getting, and I bought a thing called Computers Links,
Okay.
which was very niche and a oddball thing to do, but it was good for learning Z80 code on it. So.
Oh, nice. So you could still program on it.
It's good for programming.
What kind of stuff were you doing? And I read that you did a bit of a Zork kind of playing as well.
Well, I tried to write games on the computers, and so it's quite difficult. It didn't really work. I just kept doing these projects, and it was like I kind of dropped out of school and didn't do my exams, and I just programmed these games. None of them got anywhere until like '86, and I did a game called Obsidian, which I sold to Arctic.
Yeah.
Which is where I met a guy called Charles Cecil, of course.
And that was that on the Amstrad as well?
It was the Amstrad CPC, which was like a Super Spectrum. It had like decent keyboard and the Z80 processor, which I knew from Linux, and the Spectre later on. And it was just like the Amstrad was good. I mean, it did well. It did for a while, very short. These machines in the 80s, they did well for a very short period of time, and then so it's like, where are you getting in on the cycle? The Amstrad was good though.
Well, there's so many systems around back then as well.
Hundreds of them, yeah.
And how did you go around designing Obsidian then? Because it was a space game, wasn't it? When you go for different ports.
Yeah, it was like what they call an arcade adventure. So it's like there's a game called Sorcery for the Amstrad and various other things, which is absolutely a genius game. And I was kind of inspired by that. So I decided to do my own version of it, but more space. I didn't design it. I just did it.
And Charles then saw that. And how did you initially get in contact with him?
Just turn the cassette off. That's what you did in those days. You wrote your game and you didn't put it on a picture or something like that. You just all you could do is duplicate all the cassettes and mail them out. You get a magazine and say who are the publishers that you like, write a roll letter, do this. Please consider my game.
And
here's the cassette.
had you not kind of decided to go to college or do anything with that? You just thought games was going to be the way to go?
I was dead certain that I could confidently fail school, and I did comprehensively fail school. I have no qualifications whatsoever. I got CSE 4 in art. That was my best one.
And so then you went and you joined Arctic, and
I did.
with Charles.
I did. I got roped. Well, they published Obsidian, and then they roped me into their epic nightmare that was Mexico '86 football. which was a massive great disaster. We were embroiled in that. That was the first thing we did, yeah. And that was meant to save Arctic, and it pretty much destroyed them.
And so when Arctic went, you went into another company with Charles as well.
Charles then said the thing to do is conversions for like American games, like C64 games.
It was good stuff with US Gold, wasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it's coming from US Gold, so they would license stuff from Datasoft and people like that in the States. And would say, oh, we need this package version, we need an Amstrad version. So that was quite a good business to do. So Charles did that, and we moved to London and we did a few ports.
And then when did you kind of start seeing the Amiga, and what was the change like from going from the Amstrad to the Amiga for a developer?
The first Amiga I saw was after this company Paragon that Charles was doing. I mean, that didn't last very long either, because they said, you've done a few ports for us, Charles, why don't you actually come and work for us at this point? So I was like, how's my job from? So I went back and started just writing games. Didn't get far with that. I did a couple of games for Codemasters, and then that was getting difficult, so I went to work for Cascade Games in Harrogate. And there was an Amiga there. It was the first one I'd ever seen. And then later I bought an Atari ST.
There you go.
Yeah.
So when did Revolution form? Like, when was the idea birthed, and who was involved, and how did you all just like go for it? Did you have to invest anything?
Well, everyone went their own way. There was a people doing some ex-arty people doing stuff for Codemasters again. And then Charles ended up at Activision as development manager, and his past was writing little adventure games for the Spectrum. So he did like a thing called Adventure A, Adventure B, Adventure C. They're actually okay for the spec. Text adventures, you know. So he was quite into that kind of thing. And then he was at Activision, which, like all these companies, doesn't last very long because the American end goes bust and drags the English end and the European end down with it. So he was there, and they were selling Sierra games. They were distributing Sierra games in Europe. So they had all the numbers, and they knew that these games were selling quite well. So Charles was going, oh look, adventure games are good, so I should now start a developer again, doing adventure games, and we'll get Tony involved. So
and I guess that was always the idea, to go with story-driven adventure stuff rather than action titles.
That was Charles's thing. Yeah. I mean, he drags it to Wales. His mother has got a house there. So we all went up to deepest, darkest North Wales, but the electric was only on like half the time and stuff like that. And in between power cuts, we played like Sierra games, Legacy Barrier and stuff up in Wales. And he said, "Can you beat this? Can you come up with something that's better?" And we said, "Well, probably we can if you let us do it on the Atari ST and the Amiga."
Because Sierra games were based on the Scum engine, which was a script creation utility for Maniac Mansion, which was kind of a development from the early days, and all the games were set to that kind of system. How did you guys approach doing something differently and making you stand out?
Well, we wanted to beat them technically, which was possibly a good idea, possibly not. Game design should come first, really. But we said we could do a game where the whole world runs, because we'd seen things like remember Gargoyle games, they had Turn and Log and Last Port, that kind of thing, and we thought they were kind of a living world kind of thing. So we thought we'd combine that with adventure games and come up with something that was sort of stand out and basically beat the Americans.
And this was very point and click based still.
Yeah.
With Lurid and Temptress being the first big one to use it.
Yeah, Lurid was the first one.
And that was a virtual theatre engine.
Virtual theatre,
yeah. So the idea was that things would also happen in virtual theatre independently and alone, rather than being driven by the main character.
Yeah, the game characters would basically wander off screen and do their own stuff, and then you could follow them and see that it was real and all that kind of thing. That was the basic principle of it.
And how long did Revolution kind of stick to using that engine? Because I know the Scum engine was used till like later Monkey Island titles and all throughout kind of Sierra's life.
Yeah, I mean, we were full into it for the Temptress, which was really the virtual creating game. Steel Sky, it was the full engine, but it was more designed was the game, and we kind of stopped using a lot of the functionality. And we used it a little bit because Joey, we were talking about Joey a few minutes ago.
If you don't know, Joey's like the little assistant robot that follows you around.
It's kind of like Marvin from Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah.
There's a whinging robot sort of thing. But you kind of build him out of bits, and then you can tell him to go off around. You can say, go off around the world and do this for me, and this stuff. And it kind of worked, and it was like really doing it. I mean, we were very proud of it because it was technically it's quite advanced. But for an adventure game, it was actually quite hard to design for. So the puzzles got less and less, and then later on. When we were talking about Broken Sword, and there was no robots in Broken Sword, and I was like, Charles, it's still going to be virtual fears to this game, isn't it? And he was like, no, it's just going to be exactly what Sierra would do with the game engine.
Well, I was going to say with Laura the Temptress, how much did that then kind of establish the company with the success of the game and make you guys a proper player?
Totally. I mean, people were totally into it. Charles did a talks and demoed the engine. And he told the character with a menu he said, go into that room and get the bottle, and then you come back and give it to him. And the little character did it, and he came back, and like it was like a Japanese audience, and they all stood up and started clapping and bowing and stuff. And it was like Charles was like, "Bloody hell, this is good. This is the engine that's the future."
Yeah.
And it kind of wasn't, but it got us going, yeah.
And I think Beneath the Steel Sky was a huge undertaking as well. And how did that kind of come together with stuff like Dave Gibbons, of Watchmen fame, doing some of the graphics, the whole idea of, you had a talkie version as well, with voice acting. It was when CD-ROM was starting to come out.
Yeah, well, eventually we ran out of money doing the development on it, so the Virgin Interactive had this clever idea whereby they would do a CD32 version, I think it was, and they got a big advance for that and gave it to us and said, finish the game with this, and then we'll worry about the CD32 version later on. But it was the first one that was voiced, the first big game that was voiced, I think.
Yeah, and it was incredibly slow at loading the voice, I remember, because it was like at a one-speed CD drive. But some of the voices in that game are hilarious. There's like proper northern blokes in there and stuff. And
it was like they basically walked into a pub and said, "Who wants to be in a video game?" It's like it was like random people, and it was done in a room next to a busy road in London with a bus stop, and you could hear the traffic going past in the background and stuff. It wasn't a luxurious production by any sense, but it was the first game that was fully voiced, I think.
What are your memories that stood out of that game?
Just how hard it was to do. I mean, there was like 9 of us, and it was meant to be 6 months, and of course it was more like 18 months, and the money was running out, and everyone was getting annoyed with us, and we were fighting amongst ourselves because it was disorganised and wasn't planned, But the thing about it was this is actually a good way to. It's risky, but and they don't do it like that anymore because it's unprofessional, I suppose. But we just like did it. It was like we were in a rock band and we just put the game together, and it just worked out because it was quite a good game, I think, and it was more than the sum of its parts because the budget was virtually nothing, and it just all the people were right, and the game design just worked out, and the end result was good,
Well, what kind of software did you use and hardware for development then? Because you said that audio was done and you could hit buttons and stuff outside. Were you using like cheaper systems and stuff to get it all going?
It was it was Atari and Amiga, wasn't it? So I think we had PDS systems for the 68000 platforms. I mean, it was all shoestring sort of stuff, but 386 PCs and stuff like that.
And
No, there was no network. Nothing was networked. So we had what we had was like a big thing on the wall with little shelves, and every room had a floppy disk with the graphics on it, and that was the server. It was this stack of shelves, little cardboard cutout things, and there was a disk A and disk B, I think, and you put stuff on the B disk, and then if it was right, it would go onto the A disk, and you would get the disk, and you would throw these disks around to each other. So the network was like disks spinning across the room.
Ninja style.
Yeah, and they were quite dangerous. You remember 3.5 inch. If you caught them wrong, you could the little sleeve thing, you could cut yourself on it. So there was a certain amount of danger involved as well. Just to make it more interesting.
And it was
newcomers to the company, they didn't stand a chance.
They had to develop their skills.
Yeah, you had to live or die by your disc caption skills.
I remember it being quite a big release with Virgin involved as well.
Yeah, I mean they didn't exactly fund it in a generous way, but they were quite excited about it.
Yeah, and they made a big deal of it with advertising and stuff like that.
Yeah, in those days they were very keen. Yeah, I mean they were quite good. You know, they were a bit like us. They were just like a unruly band of people that thought they could do something with themselves and improve on what other people were doing. And for a while they were really great. Yeah.
Later on, then, which titles did you get involved with straight after?
Well, from Steel Sky, we went basically as Broken Sword was next. The one that really made revolution.
And that's quite a leap, isn't it, as well, in technology and approach.
Yeah, I mean, what happened was they kind of saw how well Believe for Steel Sky did, and the fact that it had been done for virtually no money. You know, they said that they had like an about turn, and they said what would happen if we just threw quite a lot of money at it, and can you make the best adventure game ever? And that was basically the spec. You know, the premise was make a really great adventure game, and can you beat Monkey Island? You know,
and that whole approach of the storyline as well, coming from Charles with the mythology. What did you guys think about that? Because it was a bit of a change in direction from the sci-fi world of before.
Well, my theory is you switch. You do a sci-fi game, and then you do a fantasy game, and then like dungeons, and then space, and then dungeons, and then space. You just keep, like Alien Night Law. You just keep switching. So we were after Steel Sky, we were ready to switch back to like something oldie worldy. Charles wants to do a pyramids game with solving hieroglyphic puzzles and stuff. That was his thing. And I think Sean Brennan down at Virgin Interactive, he'd read Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco, and that's got Templar stuff in it. And he said, no, forget Egyptians. Pyramid stuff doesn't sell.
Yeah.
And do Templars instead. And that's where that came from. So it wasn't actually our idea. It came from them.
And it's like highly researched as well. I don't know, Charles is like totally in it. He'll go and visit the locations and make sure everything's quite accurate.
Yeah, it's a good way of seeing the world. Yeah.
Did you get to go to any of the places?
I didn't see any of these things. No, I've seen the photos of Charles in the catacombs of Paris and things like that. It looked very nice. Yeah. That's what Charles used to do. There. He was the one that got to travel the world. Yeah.
I hear you can get lost in those as well. So.
Yeah. You probably can. Yeah.
I was wondering as well with the technology. It was just coming into that CD-ROM period and being able to stream audio on Beneath a Steel Sky before was quite tough. But having the animation there and the sound, how much of a challenge was that?
I mean, the challenge was the sheer size of it. It was just a massive game, even though it was funded properly, it was just huge. And I mean, if you look at it now, it was written in 18 months, which I actually can't quite believe now, because these games often take 3-4 years. I mean, they worked us to the bone, but. And we came from the 8-bit days where a game takes 3 months, so we thought 18 months was a long time. And looking at it now, I can't quite believe we did it, because they've spent double that time doing the reforged version of it, It's the same game.
I was wondering what the press's approach to it was as well, because at this time, everything had to go to 3D. They had a lot of games going onto the PlayStation. It was 3D, 3D, 3D with everything. And Broken Sword was completely the opposite to that. How did they react to that?
Well, the timing was lucky, and we just got away with it because a year later the tide was turning, and the publisher changed quite a lot. And they were like, "Yeah, we know we put a lot of money into Broken Sword, but can you do the next one for half the money and half the time? Because we don't think this is necessarily the right thing to do." And what did it for adventure games and what did it for 2D and all those things was the PlayStation. It took off big time, and then it was like going back to Pyramids, not selling. Tomb Raider was like they were suddenly obsessed with Tomb Raider, and there's two games. There was Resident Evil and there was Tomb Raider, and they were like, "Guys, can you do this? Can you do this? Forget this point and click and stuff." And there's no else on the PlayStation, and I should buy one, which no one did. So they were saying by that point, do a sequel to Broken Sword really quickly and cheaply. Call it Broken Sword 2, and then that's the end of it. So it was lucky time for Broken Sword 1 because it just got in that thing where they were like all they were interested in was beating LucasArts, so they threw a ton of money at it. But after that, it was all downhill really.
And stuff like Tomb Raider as well started to take on mythology and the ideas as the games developed and kind of storylines, where Broken Sword, had that all in originally.
Yeah, I mean we were slightly aggrieved really because all these other games started putting characters in the story and the puzzles, and we were like, you can't just steal our best bits and put it in your action games, guys. This is not fair at all. So that's what happened. So suddenly, every game had stories and character arcs and all that kind of stuff, And they stole it all from Adventures.
And I was just wondering, over the time of all the Broken Sword games and developments, what were the toughest things? Was it kind of getting more content in there, getting to these tight timelines?
In Broken Sword, it was just a huge design. Massive game, so the sheer weight of dealing with it was difficult. Getting all the graphics drawn, all the sprites, and there's like 80,000 frames of animation in Broken Sword, and there was only like the core team was probably less than 20 people. So
yeah, I was going to think doing that nowadays you'd have a much bigger team, but back then
you'd have 800 people in Canada in a big studio. You really would. Tax exempt studio in Canada.
Well, we're going to do some questions from the audience soon, because I'm sure there's lots of people that want to ask about Broken Sword, but I want to first talk about a new title that you're making for kind of a new old system as well, which is you've got the t-shirt on there.
I've got a t-shirt, it's the only one that exists.
Yeah, Urbex Warriors.
Urbex Warriors, yeah. Me and Stu Cambridge of Cannon Fodder fame have got together, and we're doing this game, which is an action-adventure game for the Spectrum Next. And that'll probably kickstart in September or something. Then we'll do an Amiga version. We'll soup it up and do an Amiga one, which is really where we're heading, because the Amiga's the machine we all love, really. And maybe Mega Drive, maybe Dreamcast.
And if you don't know about the Spectrum Next, it's kind of a future continuation of the Spectrum, like what it would have been, but there's been lots of games that are being developed for there, and actually it's really interesting that indie games are starting to come out from the Spectrum area and then going out to wider gaming. Why is that approach working more nowadays for you?
Well, the Spectrum Next is good because it's such a limited machine. It's basically if you got a Spectrum and you got an Amiga and you crossbred them somehow in a farming type way, the child would be a Spectrum Next, which is like a super Spectrum. But you can still only do so much for it. It's 64K and all that kind of thing. So in effect, it is. So you can only do so much, but it's a very vibrant fan base for it. So it's a good place to write the first version of a game, I think. And then if it works, you can say which bits of this game worked, which bits didn't work. Take that version and then sort of port it upwards and do Amiga Next and that kind of thing.
And you think you get more attention by releasing it on the Spectrum Next, doing a box and everything, and that would then rather just releasing it onto Steam with all the other stuff that's coming out at the moment?
Yeah, Steam, you know, it's like 1,000 games every week or something. It's pretty difficult up there. So I think for us, and you know, with all the problems in the games industry at the moment, at the top end with layoffs and you know, the sort of slow motion collapse of the whole thing, being back down in retro land and in the what is really the heart of gaming, you know, where it started and where it's coming back to be there developing again. Firstly, it's great that we can, and it seems that there's a lot of enthusiasm. So it's a good place to be working. Yeah.
Are you finding it more fun as well, coding in that way again?
It was a bit scary. I was very confident. I was saying, can I write a Spectrum game? Yeah, no problem. We used to do it. And then I was like, oh, hang on, it was like 38 years ago. You know, the last time I tried to do Z80 assembler. Can I still do it? You know, and then I was picked up the old book, Z80 instruction codes, and you know, after about a week, I was back into it. Yeah.
Well, tell us about the game concept and the idea.
Well, it's we wanted to do an arcade game, basically as if it could be in the arcades. So quite simple but playable. And we looked at Gauntlet as something that seemed like a good basis for building on top of. So it starts a bit like Gauntlet, but there'll be more puzzling. There'll be a bit of chat between the characters and a bit more story. You know, so it's like Gauntlet. Super Gauntlet.
And the theme's urban exploration as well.
Yeah, you know, if you look on YouTube, there's like millions of you know, people that go into some factory in Russia and discover all sorts of stuff underneath it and things. So that seemed like a good premise for a video game, I thought. And yeah, so this one starts like in the jungle or something, in like some temple type place, and then they discover more and more, and they go deeper down, and it gets weirder and weirder. And, I mean, why not?
It sounds really cool. When do we expect to see it? When it's done.
When it's done. We will hopefully show it at Zap Live.
Oh, good.
We should do. I mean, even though it's a Commodore show, we're going to show a Spectrum game and see how it goes.
It could eventually make it
risk our lives at a Commodore show with a Spectrum game. But that's. I mean, hopefully people are going to go to Zap Live. It's a great show. But we'll be there showing this game.
Excellent. Well, I was wondering if we had any questions from the audience at all. If you want to put your hand up. Any broken sword ones? No? Oh, you've got one there, sorry.
So you have a more technical background in programming, but you did work on jingles and mix. How did you find that transition?
I mean, in the old days when games were put together by a very small number of people, you would naturally be connected to all parts of it anyway, you know. So I mean, I was programming, but I would go to the design meetings because there's only 6 people. So why wouldn't everyone go to every meeting, you know? And I think that's something that's lost when you've got big teams, you know. I mean, if you're working at Ubisoft in Canada, a common theme I keep referring back to, but you know, they have literally hundreds of people, and unless you're the vice president of game design, you're not going to go to any design meetings. You know, you're going to be drawing blades of grass or whatever department you're in. You know, so it's not the same. And I think making games is a bit like making rock music or pop music or something. It should be the number of people that can be in a band should be the amount of people making a game. And everybody is involved, and the vision is shared. And people might argue, but you come to a conclusion, and that's the thing you make, you know. So I think it's sad when like Revolution eventually grew to the point where maybe I was in a programming meeting and I didn't get to go to the design meeting, and you know, something's lost when that happens, I think.
Any more?
With Vertex, are you going back into that same role of jack of all trades?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll not be composing any music, but apart from that, pretty much everything, yeah. I mean, I'm working with Stu, I'm not thankfully having to draw any graphics, but you know, we'll discuss the two, and it's basically the two of us at the moment, and everything gets discussed, you know, so it's just like the old days. But knowing what we know after 40 years in the industry, you know.
And Stu's fantastic with the pixels as well, so...
Stu's a genius,
yeah. really iconic stuff that you've done as well.
Yeah. I mean, this T-shirt, that's Stu's logo. But I took this to the printers on like Thursday, and they were like, "Oh, it's come out all pixelated." I said, "Don't worry, guys, it's meant to be like that."
It's not a low quality JPEG.
They were really worried about it.
So my experience with more your work is mainly particularly Steel Sky, because I stumbled across it in GOG for free, and then loved it to bits.
Cool.
And those sorts of like the ScumVM style, though it isn't ScumVM, but the idea was it's the pixel style was very much done by Exciting Source like. I've recently found out that we got a sequel. I'm assuming you weren't involved in that, but regarding like old games of the age of Beneath the Steel Sky getting more modern revivals, what is your take on things like that? Basically, is it people of your age basically wanting to revive things that you love to bits, or is it more just a case of trying to revive old things just for money grab? The idea is that I'm seeing some other properties like that just come back and I'm like, wow, I've not heard that name in 20 years. So
you're on about Beyond the Steel Sky.
Beyond the Steel Sky is, and I've heard recently that Sam Source was getting a new game this year. So it's like some of these old games of that era are getting new games. And I'm like, the hell? So
Yeah, I mean, it happens for different reasons, I suppose. I mean, Beneath the Steel Sky was interesting because, I mean, Revolution actually owned the IP. I mean, if you're a developer, you know, if you own an IP, you actually do have something worthwhile. And it was probably a mistake that it wasn't developed into another game sooner. And because Broken Sword was such a hit that publishers were just like, oh, do a Broken Sword, do a Broken Sword. And we never got to do another Steel Sky. And some of us really wanted to, so we kept, you know, every few years we'd come up with another design document and say, how about this, you know, another Steel Sky, can we do it? And it didn't happen until Beyond, which was, you know, not that long, well, a few years ago now. But I mean, I was disappointed that they went down the 3D route, and I thought it was going to be a mistake, and decided not to be part of it. You know, I think it should have come sooner, and it probably should have stuck to its 2D kind of roots.
It was quite a drastic change in art style, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to see that kind of thing myself. It doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do, but it's not what I would have done. The reforged Broken Sword. I mean, there's obviously a commercial imperative behind that project, but on the other hand, it does get the game. I mean, it's a game that's been played now more than it was even 10 years ago, and I guess the theory is that if you reforge it, it gets to go on the consoles, which it was always, because it's so. And in the resolution of that game was 640 by 400, and they wouldn't let us port it onto PlayStation, you know, like 4 or 5 or anything like that. They'd just say it needs to be 4K and all this kind of thing. So that's part of the reason. And I think it's good to keep games alive. So, you know, if a game's getting difficult to play and someone says do a remastering or whatever they're going to call it, I mean, it's obviously it's a commercial thing, but there can be value to it as well. You know, it's not just commercial cynicism.
I mean, you've also got ones that are 3D still that are point and click on, the Telltale engine type ones that things like the Walking Dead and the Sam Max remakes, I suppose. Because I mean, there's 3D point and clicks came in Renaissance, kind of like 2010 sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's I think there is still appetite for it. It's just the idea that it's kind of maybe just the art style and find the right stories to in some cases.
Yeah, and on the Scum side of that, you got Thimbleweed Park as well. And
I mean, the interesting thing is a lot of these things are coming back in vogue anyway. So pixel art is now. You know, it used to be like, well, you don't want to see pixels anymore. It's got to be smooth, and now pixels are like popular again. So it's, and I noticed that there's a trend at the moment for like PC games that are in the style of PlayStation 1. You know, which is pretty funny, and you never would have thought that. But you know why? I think if you got like Tomb Raider 1 or something, you kind of want to keep it the same. I mean, maybe put it in a new engine so it keeps running properly. But I think in that kind of game, you would keep the graphics now, wouldn't you? Because they're attractive and they're right, really.
People going for the warped textures, you know, deliberately now.
Yeah, how can we make our game look as bad as the old games?
Any more questions?
Out of curiosity, if the Sea Scout was made using the same art style as those very neat Enix games, 2.5 HD with very high pixel art and then a 3D map, would that be something?
More so, yeah. I mean, it's personal preference, really. I mean, I think it should have been 2D, maybe 3D, as you say, so you change. I mean, the beauty of 3D is you can change the angle, obviously. You know? So, I mean, maybe do it in 3D, but make it look 2D, and then you can at least play with the angles, you know. Because obviously, if you got George, we do push the angle of the broken sword backgrounds quite a bit, and we kind of get away with it. You can never like look down on a scene or something like that because George isn't drawn from that angle, you know. So you're limited in what you can do. Whether that's a problem, I mean, it probably isn't really. I mean, do people like Broken Sword for its story and characters and humour and puzzles, or do they like it because it's just fixed angles? I mean, it's probably all those things, but you don't need to overemphasize the graphics. You know, it's just a part of it. So I think, does that answer the question? Maybe.
Anyone? We've got one at the back.
Sorry, I'm just trying to picture it in my brain now. When you were doing point-and-click games, yeah, I always found that you got a little puzzle which would just basically stop you dead in your tracks. You'd never play the game again. So how much playtesting did you do to make sure that people didn't hit that point?
They used to be harder to play than they would be now. When I was a kid at school, you'd go to Smith's or whatever, buy a game, and that was your game for like the next month or something, and you had to get the value out of it, and people didn't mind being really stuck. It was part of the fun, really. And adventure games used to be very difficult, and the puzzles were obscure, and people kind of accepted it. I think now it's a bit more of a risk to get people terribly stuck because you've got so many distractions. You know, this is the TikTok era, and people's attention span is very short. I think if you lose people in the game, if they're stuck, if someone's stuck in a game and they close it down and say, "I'll come back to it later," they never do. They've got something else to do. So you've got to make games a bit more accessible, and they've got to kind of move at a decent pace. So I think if we did another adventure game, it'd be designed with that in mind. You know, you wouldn't want to get people horribly stuck. What were you stuck on? Out of interest.
I don't know which your game, but I remember the goat.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry about that, but it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
Who do I blame for the pub in Ireland on Broken Sword? Spent far too many hours in there.
It's a nice place to be, though, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, I think those games were kind of deliberately designed to be a bit tough sometimes, and that was part of the fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you would every now and again you think there needs to be something to slow people down here. So you can get it wrong and make it too hard. You know?
Yeah, asking your friends and rereading the manuals and stuff like that.
Or buying the magazines and looking for the hints and tips.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
those guidebooks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any more? We've got one at the front.
So in like Broken Sword, you always just pick up everything you can and then not really know how you're going to use it later. So what's your favourite strange use of an item or an unexpected use of an item? I'm always just thinking about using the pants.
Yeah, I mean, there was the coal thing, wasn't there, where you can feed the coal to the goat in Broken Sword 2, and he starts talking to you. That's a big one. I can't remember who thought of that. I mean, yeah, you're right. It was a case of thinking of something creative to do. I mean, there was often a lot of Easter egg type things. I mean, Broken Sword, you can play Broken Sword and it's like there's a fast route through it, but there's a lot of stuff to the side that we just put in for fun, you know. So yeah, I mean, always try different things for different things. You never know what you find. And the thing about Broken Sword was it responded to everything. Whatever you tried, it would respond. And that was why it was so expensive. And there was 12,000 lines of dialogue in it or something. And, the publishers thought it was going to be like 3,000 lines, and they were getting the bills back for the translations and stuff. And they weren't happy. But you know, years later, who cares? I mean, who cares that it costs so much money? Because people are still playing it and it's a great game. You know, it's not about the money.
Cool. Any more? No? Okay. Oh, we've got one from Jonah.
Just a quick one for you to sort of finish off.
Yeah.
I wondered if making games takes the fun out of playing them. I've got a friend who worked in a pickle factory and he hates pickles.
He's not called Rick, is he? I mean, yes. I think adventure games. I mean, I liked the old 2D ones and the text ones. You know, my idea of a good adventure game is like a level 9 game. And I often didn't like the ones when we were developing them, like in the Broken Sword era. I didn't play many of the other ones just because I wasn't very interested in what people were doing, and I didn't want to copy their ideas or anything like that. And yeah, we all play different genres, I guess. You know, I was playing RPGs and stuff because I mean, it does a little bit.
Are you sort of analysing how things are made more than sort of relaxing into
Yeah, and it is very easy to be kind of get a bit cocky, you know, and say, "Oh, they've done that wrong," and then it's you shouldn't be doing that. You should just be enjoying it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm playing them again now. Hobbs Barrow, I thought was the best thing ever. You know, a really great game. So people are doing good things again, and it's good to see the genre doing well. And yeah, I mean, I'm just a player. I'm not developing adventures right at the moment. It'd be good to do one again in the future. So you know, I can be a player without worrying about it too much.
Awesome. Can we get a big hand for Tony? So next up we've got